So, you know how to make the first notes on the Shinobue. Now let's look at how to play the higher octaves. A while ago I made a video on playing the second octave called Cannae for shakuhachi, and recently somebody asked me if the techniques I described there can be applied to the Shinobue as well. The short answer is yes. So good news. So just watch the video linked up here in the corner. Please subscribe. Bye! Okay, so for your convenience and despite my incessant need for making stupid jokes, I'll go through everything for the Shinobue as well. It's basically the same script though, I'll just make the explanations a bit more compact. Please note that some teachers use other techniques, and while some of those may seem wildly incompatible, in the end there's not that much of a difference. But with my way, you have a good chance of playing in a relaxed way and producing good tone colors. First, let's briefly talk about names and fingerings. The first octave is called ryo on the Shinobue. On shakuhachi, the first octave is also called otsu, but I've not heard that term used for the Shinobue, so I'll stick with ryo. The second octave is called kan, and the third daikan, just meaning big kan basically. The notes in kan are mostly the same, just one octave higher, except the fingering for 1 is different in the second octave. So in the first octave, we have these basic notes. Then in the second octave, this fingering for 1 is different, where we lift the left index finger. But apart from that, all the fingerings in the second octave in kan are the same as in ryo. There's not much difference between having this finger down or up for 1. There is a noticeable difference in tone color, as you may hear, but the pitch is not affected very much. But that's the only big difference between ryo and kan. And then in daikan we have completely different fingerings. So there we have Please refer to a fingering chart to get the fingerings. And I should also mention I'm using a number 3 Shinobue today. This is just because the flute is a bit bigger and the changes I'm going to explain later are quite tiny, so it's a bit easier to see, I think. Now let's briefly look at the physical basis of what is different between the octaves. Playing kan means to use a technique found in many wind instruments called overblowing. Different types of wind instruments use different forms of overblowing, but for the Shinobue, the physical basis is actually very simple. You need to increase the airspeed with which you blow air into the flute. That's it, simple, end of video. Please subscribe, bye!
Repetition legitimizes. Repetition legitimizes. Repetition legitimizes.
I just hope that one day these stupid jokes don't get so much on your nerves that you stop watching my videos. Anyway, you seem to like it. Okay, so you're watching this video, so maybe it's not quite so simple after all. How do you make the airstream faster? There are 2 basic options. If this is the opening of your lips, you basically can push more air through the same opening, basically blowing harder. Or you can have a smaller opening and just push the same amount of air through. And for the same volume of air to be able to get through the smaller opening, it has to go faster. So basically just modify the embouchure. Imagine a garden hose. It's the same principle. If you open the tap wider, more water is flowing and the water stream gets faster, so all the water can get through. Alternatively, you can hold a finger on the opening to make it smaller and the water that comes out has a higher velocity. When you started playing and were struggling to get your first tone out of this thing here, which is quite tricky at the start, I'm sure you used the brute force solution. Okay, it's not really a solution because it basically just consists of just blow so hard that the thing makes a sound. And the sound almost certainly was in kan, or at least part of the time it was in kan. Now that you're getting a bit more control and can play in ryo, in the first octave, you need to learn to control your airstream so that you can play kan without using the brute force method. Why do you not want to use the brute force method? Apart from being very inelegant, it's just so exhausting, and we don't want you to faint and hit your head and get injured. That's not why we play Shinobue. The second reason is that the sound that you get this way is actually not very good. Some teachers do suggest a method that is commonly used in other flutes. So you use these muscles here and you make a smiling motion like this, or you make a frowning motion like that. I think I'm more of a smiler rather than a frowner. And by that, you change the tension of the lips and make the embouchure smaller. This is not wrong in principle, and in the end it's a useful tool to have in your Cannae toolbox as well, because it can create a very stable embouchure. But I don't think this is really the best way to start learning to play Cannae. Doing it this way has some drawbacks. It is hard to control because it is difficult to just engage these muscles here and pull back the lips so that you make the smiling movement without tensing the lips themselves. So you have to practice to dissociate these two muscle groups, the ones on the side here and the lips. Why are tense lips not so good? Lip tension affects the tone color. The tone gets more noisy, and the noisy tone is usually not what you're aiming for. Except for special effects, of course. This works very nicely on these bamboo flutes doing things like that. But that you only want to do when it's intended and not just because you cannot do it in another way. And there's also the issue that playing with tense lips needs a lot of energy and your muscles will tire very quickly, making it harder to control your lips. A better technique, in my view, is to move the chin instead of these muscles and relax your lower lip. While you're doing that, don't let your cheeks billow out, so not like that. Pull your cheeks in a bit between the teeth. And here you can see a connection to the smiling technique as well. But basically what you want to do is that you move your chin up and down. So when you do that, you can observe that the speed of the airstream that leaves your mouth changes quite dramatically. Of course, when we do it on the instruments, the changes will be much smaller. How can you practice this? The basic practice is that you go from the lower octave to the higher octave by just moving your chin up, and by that closing the embouchure a bit, and not really trying to get to the high octave. So this looks a bit like that. I'm playing 6 for that, but you can use any tone basically. So as you can see, the change between the octaves was not very clean because the movement of the chin is very slow. So there is a big area where you basically alternate between the octaves back and forth. And this is quite audible. But for an exercise, this is actually very good. So just focus on the movement of your chin and just observe where the high note comes in. As I said, you can do this with any note basically. Okay, so that's the basic exercise, and basically this probably will occupy you for a couple of weeks or something like that. It won't come very easy because you really want to try to keep your lower lip relaxed while moving the chin and not really change anything else apart from the chin movement. Then the next exercise is to intentionally switch from ryo to kan. So for example, this, of course, is very important to control for playing pieces because there you want to be able to decide if you want to play a note in kan or in ryo or in daikan. So we had 2 exercises so far: slow movement of the chin and intentional switch between the octaves from low to high. Then the more challenging exercise is to go the other way, changing from kan to ryo. So let's do it with 5 for a change. So here you go in the opposite direction, obviously. You have a smaller embouchure and you move your chin down to make the embouchure bigger. This actually is more difficult because you need to relax your muscles more instead of just pushing a bit into the note. So this is a very good third exercise. I'm talking a bit more about techniques and exercises in the shakuhachi video that I mentioned earlier.
Repetition legitimizes. Repetition legitimizes. Repetition legitimizes.
But I think you can make a good start with what I just said up to here. If you want to have some more ideas, please check out that video. It's quite a bit longer than this one. But let me give you 2 quick tips for practice, especially for the first exercise when you're just moving the chin slowly upwards. Don't try to play the high octave. Just observe what's happening. Just move your chin slowly up. And then if there is a change to the high octave at some point, good. If there is no change, good. Just continue with practicing the movement. The other tip is to practice with a mirror. The visual feedback will help you a lot to understand what you're doing. But as always, the quickest way to learn all this is to have somebody to give you feedback on what you do. That's the main job of a teacher, of course. But if you know somebody who plays Shinobue, ask them. They will be able to give you some tips on what you can improve on, and they will learn something too. Because there is no better way to learn than to teach. So actually you're doing them a favor. Very important. Good selling argument if you want to convince somebody to teach you. Okay, as always, I hope you found this video useful. Please like, subscribe, ring the bell, leave me a comment if you have any questions about this technique. My channel is still so small that I reply to all the comments, so this is your chance before I go big, before I go viral, which will never happen because I'm talking about very exotic stuff, but never mind. One can dream. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.